In this video, I'm joining Megan Marlow and the traders from her Growth Hub private mentorship and trading community for a live performance coaching Q&A. We're tackling the toughest trading psychology challenges that keep people feeling stuck, losing money, or leaving profit on the table. And just some of the topics that we'll be covering include rebelling against rules and feeling limited by discipline, taking the majority of losses in the first 30 minutes after market open, and a destructive habit of taking trades that don't fit your A+ setup criteria or even your trade plan, and more. If you're new to the channel, my name is Créde Sheehy-Kelly. I'm a high-performance psychologist chartered in Ireland, and I specialise in working with traders and entrepreneurs. I've been coaching high performers since 2007 to help them master their mindset for peak performance and a richer life. If you want to learn more about Megan's Trader Mentorship and Growth Hub community, I'll link her details in the description box below. And if you would like to learn how to permanently overcome destructive habits in your trading and how to conquer discipline and consistency for good, then check out my free Trading Psychology Masterclass. In this free training, I cover 3 of the most common mindset mistakes that traders make that keep them in a cycle of losing money and giving back profit to the market. And I even include 2 free bonuses to help you apply this training to your own trading for maximum results. So I'll leave a link to that in the description box below and also in the pinned comment. Right, let's get into it. Got it. Yeah, thanks.
Good to go. Okay, awesome. So welcome everybody to performance coaching today on this fine Wednesday. I know typically we do a trade review today, but we have a special guest in the house. This would be Miss Créde Sheehy-Kelly. She is a high performance psychologist, and I may be slightly biased, but she is honestly one of the best, if not the best performance coach or performance psychologist that I've ever worked with. She does a really fantastic job of digging into the core issue that is causing you to slip up in your trading. And if you like this type of coaching and you like working with Créde and you like the style that she has, I want to remind everybody that she does have a course that you guys can purchase and you can work through on your own terms. I have posted that in our Discord room. I will repost it after this session for you guys. It's a great course. She worked really, really hard on it, and you can kind of go at your own pace through it. So anyways, without further ado, Miss Créde is here to help you with all of the things that you're struggling with so deeply, and I will let her take it away for now.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. And hi to everyone. And thank you, Megan, for a lovely introduction. That's high praise. So hopefully I can do it justice on the call today. I'm just going to let everyone know I have a laptop here to the side where I have the questions. So just if I'm turning to the side, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just checking in on the questions, making sure I'm answering every aspect of it. So we're going to, like Megan said, we have a good few questions. I do have a tendency to go very deep into answers. So we're going to try and be as efficient with time as possible, but still make sure that we get you hopefully practical answers that you'll be able to implement in your trading so that you can actually walk away with something that's going to transform things, even if in a small way for you today. So the questions were brilliant, really interesting ones. Love getting interesting questions because it creates a great discussion. So I guess with that said, we'll jump into it. And the first question was from Lisa. And so what we're going to do is I have the question here, but rather than me just reading it out to the screen, I'm going to ask Lisa if you're there. I think I saw a message saying that you don't have a camera, but if you can jump on mic, that'd be great.
Yep, I'm here.
And so if you want to share your first question framed in your own words, I've had to think about, what I want to say already, but you were talking about struggling with strict rules and the rigidity of rules. So do you want to just kind of explain your question to the group and then we'll go through the answers?
Yeah, it just really hit me the other day that I've never been a rule follower. And when you say the word rules, it has like a negative connotation to it. And so that's my struggle is how do I turn my mindset, like how do I rewire my brain? The rules aren't bad. They are actually my ally. They're going to protect and conserve mental capital as well as my financial capital. But it's almost like discipline, like what I did with discipline being such a negative, for me, it's a negative word. I turned it into patience. I need patience in my trading. With rules, I'm trying to work through the same thing. Like I struggle with that. And I even asked my husband when I say rules, do you view it as a negative thing? He's like, no, he's an engineer. He follows rules. he likes rules. I'm like, I really hate rules. And he recognizes that in me too. Like, and so tactical rules I'm okay with because I will stalk my trades and look for the tactical edge. But with the broader picture, like rules, especially with max loss on the day, I want to make my money back. And so then I get myself into trouble sometimes.
Okay, so this is a
Does that make sense?
yeah, absolutely. It does. I'm sorry, my brain is just going. There's lots of different things I
And I
want to
know
touch
it
on for
has to,
this.
and I, without getting too personal, I know it has to do with some childhood trauma stuff that I've worked through. But yet that word still has a negative connotation for me.
So, and that's something I was gonna like touch on. There's different aspects to this. So, and just again to reassure everyone, we can actually get we can dig into this in depth without anyone disclosing any very specific personal information. So I can talk high level, which can still give you a steer as to how you would start working on this. So I just want to reassure everyone of that. Um, so Lisa, it's such an interesting question. And I totally identify as having a personality that doesn't like rules. Like I'm the exact same. Um, However, when it comes to trading and what you're talking about, where it's, you know, a goal that is your personal goal, you want to make X amount in trading, you want to be successful in trading, and then you're coming up against this challenge of, you know, that resistance to rules, then it's definitely something to address. My first question, and this goes for pretty much every single trading psychology challenge. The way that you overcome any trading psychology challenge, there's kind of a process to tackling it. And the first thing is to understand in depth what the actual problem is. Like what's at the root of it and what are you actually talking about? Sometimes people can say, you know, I have this challenge in my trading. For example, you know, I'm not confident in XYZ, but actually when you dig into it, it's a lack of focus. And so once you understand what the full problem is and all of the different factors that are contributing to that, it's much easier then to create the solution. So pretty much I would say about 80% of the time of my coaching is spent helping people figure out exactly what the actual issue is, and then the solutions just pop out. So with this, I'd be looking at this topic from a few different perspectives. So the first one that I would say is if there's a sense of resistance to rules, and you've already mentioned it yourself, it can often be about how your subconscious mind is perceiving authority. And sometimes it's about projecting a relationship, like a significant relationship in your life onto the market. So I often have clients who struggle with the market, like they're in a battle with the market. But when we dig deeper, it's actually that they're in a battle with, you know, their father or, you know, some kind of prominent figure in their life when they were a child. And so it's like their subconscious is projecting the same emotions and the same relationship dynamic onto the market. And then they're reacting really not to the market at all, but to their childhood pattern. So it's, you've already kind of mentioned that that might be at play. So without going in depth into that, you know, the specifics of that for you, it's really helpful to be able to articulate that with crystal clarity, like exactly what is going on for you there. So if there was someone in your life who was very strict with rules and there was negative connotations around that for you, if you can get full clarity around what that dynamic was and how you felt about it, and then develop self-awareness and catch yourself when you're in the market and that kind of pattern starts to get triggered again. So you feel the resistance, you know, when your max loss, you're about to hit it and you're feeling the resistance. If you can, the more self-awareness you can develop around that automatic pattern. So the trigger happens, the emotional response happens, and then the action, the automatic action of, say, blowing past your daily loss limit happens. The more that you can recognize that for what it is, if it's linked with a childhood pattern, then the more you'll be able to actually disrupt the automatic response, like the blowing past your daily loss limit and staying in the market, and actually gain control of it. So you can say, I recognize this pattern for what it is. I'm taking charge again. I'm not letting my subconscious, you know, my child self start trading for me. So that's one part of it. And there's a lot of work you can do at a very deep level around that, you know, subconscious pattern. So even in terms of like doing live guided visualizations, either with a psychotherapist or a performance coach, to really like dig into that and explore how that's playing out in your trading. But the other piece that I wanted to ask you about was just the idea of so if the rules, and you were saying you wanted to make back the money in the loss. So just tell me about that side of it. So you were saying you're okay with the discipline in terms of your actual technical trading strategy, but then there's some things that that you're not okay with. So let's just talk about them quickly and give me some examples of those, and then we'll look at how you might address them from a different angle.
I think at that point, I'm not even seeing the market clearly. And then I'm just, I'll start trading little, you know, wiggles and moves. And it has nothing to do with my strategy. Like I've just completely lost sight of everything because I'm probably a little bit mad that I've hit max loss. I want to make it back. And I'm just doing stupid stuff at that point.
And if sorry to jump in, if you're saying, I want to make it back, so just tell me about the impulse behind that. Like, what's the emotion there? Is it, um, you know, fear around having lost the money? Is it anger at giving money to the market? Like, what's going on for you when you're trying to make back the loss?
Well, and just hearing what you've had to say so far, I don't think it has anything to do with the money at all. It has to do with that relationship that as a child, I'm fighting that relationship.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, that makes sense. And what
yeah,
are the emotions that you feel? So again, without describing, what that relationship was or who it was
I
or anything.
feel I feel rebellious. Like
Oh,
there's
yeah.
a rebellion.
Well, that
And then
makes, yeah.
it just hijacks me. And I never actually thought of that until you said it. It's like I am confronting that person and I'm being rebellious with that person, but
So
I'm putting that in the market.
that makes total sense. And it's a really common pattern. So this isn't something unusual. This is something that people do subconsciously, and they do it for years, and they don't realize that it's not the market they're fighting with. It's, whoever. And while there's other aspects to this, like because we only have a short time to go into it, I would focus mainly on this theme. There's other, you could look at and over focus on the P&L and come at that from different angles. But let's just stick with this theme to kind of get you to a point where you have some practical things you could do about it. So what's happening, and hijack is a good word, is that your subconscious, your child self, who was in that relationship dynamic, is actually taking over your trading. And that's why logic and rules and everything goes out the window, because your child self, it's literally like it has the personality, the development of a child. And usually the child self is scared or, feels a survival threat, like very basic kind of needs being threatened. And so when that event triggers, like, so you've had a few losses in a row, your child self literally comes and takes over your trading. And so what the fix to that is to, one, like resolve the child self piece of it. So that's quite deep work, and that could be done with a therapist, with through the lens of knowing it's impacting your trading, or it can be done at a lighter level with a trading performance coach. So not from a global level trying to resolve the trauma of the entire relationship, but just looking at what pieces are playing out in your trading. But the key thing in all of this is to have that awareness that this is exactly what's happening. And so when your child self is trading, they're fighting the person and they're projecting the person onto the market. So of course it's going to be really hard to follow your rules. You're going to be rebelling. So the shift that needs to take place, and this, you can work on this through different ways and it takes time, but the solution at a high level is to be able to actually move into your adult self enough to realize that you're not in battle with that person in the market, and that everything you're doing in the market is for you, the adult self. So rather than you fighting with a projected personality onto the market, the entire act of trading is something that serves you, the adult. If does that make sense? I can explain that in a different way, but I just want to kind of stop talking there and see how that lands with you.
No, that makes a lot of sense. You've given me a different perspective for sure.
Brilliant.
something that I hadn't considered. That's great. Thank you.
So as a practical takeaway then, at the start of it, this isn't the whole solution, but I would say the more that you can actually like journal and reflect and get clarity around exactly what's happening. So ask yourself, what are the emotions that are playing out? How did that pattern play out in my past? Get curious about how this is occurring for you in your trading. And over time, you'll quicker realize what's happening and be able to step into your conscious driver seat, the adult you when you trade. So you'll actually be able to recognize, oh, my inner child is taking over and I can step in and stop that from happening now. Like, the market is either neutral or it's there to serve me, like it's there to actually support me in making money. Shifting your relationship with the market with that level of self-awareness is something that's going to really support you. So I guess in our short time, that's probably the best steer I could give you. But the more that you understand around what's happening with this dynamic and the more you can reflect and journal on it, the easier it's going to be to then like intervene as your conscious adult self and stop it from happening.
Thank you. That awareness, I just feel is so powerful right now.
Well, thanks so much for sharing.
So thank
That's
you.
not an easy thing to share as well, but hopefully that really helps. And I think the next question was from you as well. You were so as an add-on to this, you were saying, I used to think I was trading with fear. Could it be the fact that I don't like rules? But actually, I think we've probably answered that. It's not fear and it's not rules. It's actually this projection of a key relationship onto the market.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. So the next question was from Laura, and she was talking about, let me see. Taking no setup trades. So is Laura there? Are you on camera, Mike?
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, hey, okay. You're not appearing on my screen. Hang on. Let me see if I can.
Sorry, I don't have my camera on.
Oh, you don't? Okay, perfect. I was wondering what was happening there. That's fine. So do you want to frame your question and then we can dig into the answers?
Sure. So I track my trades and I have a certain number of trade books that I trade. And if I take a trade outside of my trade book, I call it a no setup trade. And it doesn't necessarily mean like I'm jumping into a trade that doesn't have an entry signal or that doesn't make technically sense. It's just that I call it that. And that's probably one of my biggest trading errors. I'm not really quite sure how to, it tends to happen when I'm either getting greedy or I'm trying to make back a loss. And I guess, do you have any advice on how to make sure I am sticking to an actual trade book setup or something that I've planned out in the pre-market?
Yeah, sure. So this is a super common challenge. Like this is probably one of the most common challenges that people come to me with, that people take the course for. And you're right, it's not, there's so many different ways you could trade. There's so many different valid setups and strategies, but if it's not your particular trade book, then, you shouldn't be trading it. So with this, and again, I don't mean to keep bringing it back to the subconscious, but it's kind of also unavoidable because it plays such a huge part in trading psychology. But we can come at it from different angles. So the first and probably the most important thing to understand with any challenge where you're breaking your trading rules. So you know what you need to do and then you're not doing it. I know I need to take setups that are in my trade book and I'm not doing it. It's to understand what is the root belief or the root subconscious driver that's causing that to happen. So just to give you like a very crystal clear example of this, let's say that somebody is jumping into lots of different setups because their drive to make money is so strong. So they're focusing on the P&L or the outcome as opposed to the execution of their trading process. So if you were measuring success by the execution of your process, then you would be placing a lot of emphasis on only taking trades that fit the setups that you want to take. If you're focused on the P&L, then you're going to be looking at your P&L and saying, well, I need to make money. And so I'll just try out this setup, or, you're jumping into more trades. So one example of a reason why somebody might be really focused on the P&L over the execution of their plan could be if somebody has a subconscious belief that, my trading results, my self-worth is dependent on my trading results. So suddenly it's not about just calmly, objectively making money or following your plan, suddenly your entire self-worth is on the line. So I'm not saying this is the belief that's at play for you. It's just to give you an example. So again, if this is happening, then it's not that you're fighting your willpower. It's not that you don't have enough willpower to just stick to your A+ setups. It's that there's a subconscious drive, which is your subconscious rules like 95% of your behavior and your conscious mind rules 5%. So let's say you've the conscious goal of only take the setups that are in my trade book, and then you find you're not doing it. It's likely because there's some significance that you're placing on the P&L at a subconscious level that you maybe are unaware of, and that's driving everything. So some really common examples are linking achievement with self-worth. So linking your trading results with self-worth. It could be a scarcity money mindset where, you're feeling like you have to make money in order to survive, but it's at that real subconscious level. So there's lots of different beliefs that can drive that. But basically, the solution to it, or part of the solution, is to figure out exactly what significance you're placing on the P&L so that it's driving your impulse to jump into trades that don't fit your setup. Because, most people would be doing that because of the drive to make money is overriding the logic of just executing their plan. Let me just pause there for a second, and that's the subconscious piece. But is that resonating with you? Not to say that you would necessarily be able to on the spot pull out, exactly what the limiting belief is. But does that make sense that there might be an element of the subconscious that's driving that behavior?
100%. That's something that I've really been working on, is shifting my mindset from focusing on the P&L to focusing on following my process is really how I define my success.
Yes. And so you can work on that at a practical level too. So I would always approach this from different angles. And what you're saying there around trying to prioritize the execution of your plan, a very simple, practical way to support that is to set performance goals. So rather than looking at, definitely I would never advise anyone to have a profit target for the day. That's just general advice that applies to everybody. You can have a profit target for the week or the month, but having one on the day exacerbates an outcome focus. So instead of having is the day green or red based on profit, you're actually setting goals that hold you accountable to the execution of your plan. So an example of a goal that might work for you would be 90% or more of all trades taken met my trade book criteria. You're not saying 100% because you want to leave a little bit of room for human error and you don't want to feel completely demotivated if you slip up once. But if you actually track your performance against that goal on a daily basis, it's more than just telling your mind, I should focus on the execution of my plan and not the P&L. You're actually giving your mind something concrete and proactive to measure yourself against, so that you're tracking that, your score on that, say, every day, on every trade. Then you're creating an average for the day. So let's say, I'll make the maths easy. I'm never good at doing maths on the spot. Let's say you've done 4 trades in the day and 3 of them were your trade book and 1 wasn't. So your score is 75%, but your target is 90%. But then the next day you take 4 more trades and, that's 100% for that day. And then at the end of the week, you rate your average performance on that performance goal. So, only taking trades that fit my trade book. And then you have a score for that week, and then you try and improve on that the following week, or you try and consistently maintain 90%. It's a lot more focused than just saying, don't do this. Because when you tell your brain, like, don't do this, especially with pressure in the mix, you can actually just create ironic effects where you do the thing that you don't want to do. Whereas if you're actually switching the focus and giving yourself a practical goal that you're tracking, that you're, holding yourself accountable to, that gives your brain something much more concrete to latch onto. So I would say the answer to this, or the solution, is to work at the subconscious level. So figure out what is the exact significance that you're placing on the P&L that has nothing really to do with money particularly, or trading. And then rewire that at the level of the subconscious mind. So you're actually reshaping that belief, which is, a whole process in itself. And then the other side of it is to actually practically start implementing these performance goals and start tracking your score, like your performance against those targets. And that should help you switch the focus away from the P&L.
Great. Thank you. Totally actionable.
Great. Happy that that's
Can I just
helped.
jump
Yeah.
in real quickly? Laura, I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing or not, and maybe you kind of already had in the Discord, but I think a lot of people can relate to this. And I don't know if you maybe feel comfortable mentioning your kind of where you come from, your past career, because I think that this is something that every trader struggles with when they start out. Do you feel comfortable sharing that a little bit? Some of the stuff we've talked about?
Sure. Are you talking about where I come from advertising sales and my performance was basically on generating revenue?
Yeah, exactly. And making a lot more than you do in trading.
Right. Yeah. So I was in advertising sales prior to coming to trading, and obviously, when you're in sales, the harder you work, the more money you generate in revenue, the more money you make in commissions. And so a lot of my self-worth was tied up into how much money I was bringing in. And so that really messed with my head when I came into trading. Like, I'm not successful if I'm not making money, or I'm not, I'm not a good, successful person if I'm not generating money.
That actually brings a lot more context, and it also helps me to help you in a more concrete way. So that's really common as well. When people have had past careers or, maybe concurrent careers in things like sales or the military, that comes up a lot where if someone's in the military, you can't make a mistake, people die. Then you're really wiring this idea that you just can't make mistakes, and you bring that to trading, and it's not the mindset that supports you in trading. And so what you've been able to identify there is that you're likely linking your sense of self-worth with your trading results, and you can understand why that happened. It was shaped by the career that you were in. So you're tying self-esteem, self-worth with money, the amount of money you're able to make, and probably your performance. So not even just necessarily the money, but are you succeeding as a trader? All of that. And if that's the case, the fix to that is you want to try and disconnect your sense of self-worth from your trading results. So a very concrete way that you can do that, and it sounds very simple, but it's super powerful, and Megan will be able to attest to this, is to create an affirmation script. So I do have, maybe Megan, if you've time, you could find the link to the affirmations on YouTube and just drop it in. So I have a ready-made affirmation audio that you can listen to. So it's like a mental training resource that you can just plug and play. So as I'm talking about it, if you want, if you want to just get stuck into it, you could listen to that one. But if you write affirmation statements that reinforce the idea that you are whole and worthy of love, and you have inherent value just by being who you are, you're starting to separate that sense of self-worth from your trading. So a lot of the work that we do in trading psychology, sometimes you're not even mentioning trading in the solutions. You're working at this really deep core self-concept level. So the more that you can reinforce the idea that you have value regardless of your trading results, the less pressure is going to be on your trading results, the easier it is going to be to actually stick to your plan. So it's great that you can identify the core belief that's holding you back, where it came from, and then based on that understanding, it's easy to know like what affirmation statements you would use to overcome it. If I'm sort of making a few assumptions that people maybe are familiar with affirmations and stuff there. That's just for brevity, really. But if anyone has a question around that, or Megan, if you think we need to clarify that more, let me know.
No, I think that's good. I love the idea of sharing the YouTube. The one that you're talking about is the money mindset affirmation one, right?
Sorry, no, this would be the
No.
trading affirmations one. So it's basically I created a whole affirmation audio, and I included the affirmations that I commonly used. This was based on working with tons of traders over years and years. And I took all of the main challenges that traders face and all of the affirmation statements that counteract that and put it in one. So it's better to write your own script that's tailored to you, but this script is pretty solid in terms of covering nearly all of the angles of the most common challenges that come up and the most common reasons behind those challenges. So even I can guarantee that listening to that affirmation script, there'll be ones in there that do exactly what I'm suggesting you do, because that's something that's really common for a lot of people.
Okay, cool. Can you Cindy says she thinks she found it. I was just gonna say, if not, then maybe Creda, you could just message it to me when we're done, and I can just send it to the group as well. Yeah, that's the one that I found too. Cindy, that's not the one she's talking about. That's a great one as well. But yeah, just message it to me later, and I'll just send it in the Discord to the
Perfect.
group.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. Okay. So let's see where we are. So thanks for that, Laura. There was a really quick question from Lisa, so I'm just going to answer this one just again for brevity because it's a very straightforward answer. So Lisa had asked, I'm curious if you've worked with a trader who has PTSD, and that they became a consistently profitable trader. Is it possible? So this is a really simple, straightforward answer. Yes, I have. I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I didn't work on the PTSD with that person. That was, and this is, one person I know of, but there may have been more, just that I wasn't privy to it. That person was like working with therapists on the PTSD as a separate issue. But we were able to figure out a challenge that they were facing in their trading that was to do with kind of anxiety around uncertainty and jumping out of trades, like not holding on to trades where they should have been. So they were getting out too quickly and kind of leaving profit on the table. And that was linked with that sense of anxiety. And so that person was able to overcome that and was also working on the PTSD separately at the level of the person, and successfully overcame it and was able to, increase their profitability. So I would say that in that case, it's really important to be working on the PTSD with the correct licensed professional. So for me, I wouldn't be working with someone on that because I'm not a clinical psychologist. And I would say that that's the priority. Like if you were talking about trading psychology techniques versus just baseline, therapy for the PTSD, the therapy for the PTSD would be more important and a bigger priority. But if you've got that in hand and you're working on it, you can absolutely understand how that might be creating challenges in your trading. And again, that awareness then helps you to take control for your conscious self to kind of step in. And then you can use techniques to overcome it. So my short answer is it's absolutely possible to be a consistently profitable trader, even if you've had experience of that or you're currently working through it. But I would just really caveat that the most important thing in that situation is to get the support with resolving the PTSD itself. And then you can add on the psychology stuff, when it's a suitable time to do so. Okay, so next up was Casey. No, sorry. This was Laura again. So my trading journal shows that my biggest losses come in the first 30 minutes of trading. So do you want to just talk us through that question, please, Laura?
Sure. I use TraderSync, and it chronicles what time of day I take the trades. And if I look at my stats over the last 3 years that I've been trading, it's probably 95% of my losses come within the 9:30 to 10 o'clock time frame. But it's also the time that I have a lot of my trade book setups designed for. So when I'm like today, even as a perfect example, I had PLTR on my watch list. I took the trade within the first minute of the open and it stopped me out for a 1 hour loss. But then I re-entered the trade later when it set up and it was a successful trade. So I have this mental block where I feel like if I don't get in the trade right at the open, I'm going to miss out on the move. And even though I know my stats overwhelmingly show me that 95% of my losses come from those first few minutes.
So with this, I would say there's a technical aspect and a psychological aspect. And so sometimes trading psychology answers will point back to looking at technical issues. So I understand that you're saying that your setups, like theoretically, if you were taking them and executing them, or actually, sorry, I'll reframe this as a question. In terms of backtesting your strategy, if you were to successfully execute your plan on those setups in that kind of market open time frame, would they be profitable? Like, is the issue anything on the technical side, or is it purely on the execution in that time window?
That's an interesting question. I like with Palantir today, that I executed the break of pre-market high and it reversed at a resistance level and I got stopped out. So I guess that's more of an execution because there was a resistance level of an all-time high right above where I was trying to get in. So that should have probably clued me in that I shouldn't be getting in right there. But I honestly haven't back tested everything else to see if that was a technical mistake that I made or if it was just FOMO.
So I would definitely like my first action step in this situation would be to really test the technical side of is my strategy. And sometimes I might not be using the exact right terminology. So, I'm talking at the kind of theoretical application of this because I don't trade myself, as maybe people didn't know, but my expertise is in high performance psychology. So obviously I work with traders in depth all day, every day. But the technical piece is really important because if there's any gray area or any potential crossover between psychology and technical issues, as in like if you have a trading psychology challenge and you think it's trading psychology, but you haven't ruled out that there could be any element of technical skill or execution at play, then you can't actually determine if it's a psychology problem. So the first thing we want to rule out is that it's definitely not anything to do with technical strategy. So the way that I would approach that, and maybe Megan can elaborate on this, would be to test, like to back test or test your strategy or trade books in that window of time and make sure that yes, it is purely down to how you're executing those trades as opposed to actually that maybe the strategy, the trade book is not as effective in that time window. If you can absolutely get crystal clear on that and you can say 100% if I was to execute my trade book like a robot in that time period, I'd be profitable, but I'm not doing that, then it's a psychology issue. And then the answer to that might be things around, having a pre-market preparation routine so that you can enter the market more emotionally and psychologically ready to perform right at the outset without needing to warm up. It could be doing breathing exercises to calm your nervous system if maybe it's that you're kind of too stimulated and wound up just for that time period before you relax into the trading day. So you kind of have to understand what is the actual problem before you can come up with the solutions. And the very first place to start would be to make sure that it is actually a psychology problem as opposed to just that maybe the trade books aren't as effective then. And it could sometimes be that if you were to actually test that, even if the setups are somewhat effective, you might be overall more profitable if you drop that first, say, half-hour window from your trading and only focused on like taking those trades after that window. It could be that you just eradicate those losses and that the profits that you're making from only trading in this time window, would really improve your trading overall profitability. I'll just jump in there, let Megan add anything in there from a technical perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to touch on. And I think for you, Laura, one of the things I would recommend is for those 95% of trades that you're seeing that are losses during that time, look to see if you can find a commonality in them. See if there is something that continues to pop up. And maybe it's just this, there's like every time you lose on those, it's a resistance level. And if that's the case, then the reason why the ones that happen a little bit later might be the ones working out is because now that resistance level has cleared or something along those lines, right? So I would definitely look back and see if there is a commonality with that. If it's really just that, and even if you look back and you don't find a commonality, but the more digging that you do to recognize why this doesn't work in the first, 30 minutes of the day or why you perform better and a little bit later, then you can dig into the psychology portion of it. And some of it just might be that you read the market better after having 30 minutes to see how things are playing out, right? But you won't know if that's the case unless you at least look back at some of the losses that you've had to see if there's a commonality between all of them in why they didn't work out.
That's interesting because I just always assumed it was FOMO. So Thank you.
Yeah. Find if it's technical. And if it's not technical, then dig into the FOMO aspect. But even digging into the technical side of it, it's going to put your focus on like why it works better later or why you are able to execute better later, which can then help with the FOMO because now you're like reinstilling in your mind, like, wow, like I just re-looked at like 120 trades and I am a much better trader 30 minutes later. Like the more you associate yourself with being a better trader 30 minutes after the open, the easier it is to just be that person anyways. So as you dig into your technicals, it's gonna help you kind of with the mindset as well. So whatever you find should help you kind of shift your focus and your path a little bit. And then obviously if you're still struggling with it, we can dig into it a little bit more.
Okay. Thanks, ladies.
I think that's a really important point as well, is that with a lot of trading psychology, it's about understanding the patterns of what's at play. So sometimes people too quickly jump to, oh, it must be FOMO or it's a lack of confidence, or they diagnose the issue without actually taking the time to understand the patterns. And one example that I like to use is if you track, like a real simple technique, if you track your hours of sleep that you've got the night before, plus your say physical state out of 10, your mental state out of 10, and your emotional state out of 10 consistently every day before you trade, you'll start to see some patterns. So it could be that on every day that you really succumb to FOMO and you find yourself emotionally trading, that it's actually linked with less hours of sleep the night before. Then the answer is not to go to town on your subconscious around why are you emotion-based trading, or at least that's not the first port of call. It would actually be the most basic solution is to get more sleep so that, yes, the issue around the subconscious might still be there when you fix the sleep problem, but in the hierarchy of what's most important to address in that situation, it would be the sleep. So it's when you collect data like that and you look for the patterns, the answers or the solutions to the challenges become a lot more apparent. So it really pays off to spend a lot of time getting curious around what is the actual problem, what are the factors that are contributing to this happening, and then looking for the solution rather than just jumping straight to the solution just because, there's tools like visualization and affirmations. Maybe they're not the tools that you need to be using right now because the issue is something else for you. And just as a extra bonus tip, sleep is the absolute priority over everything. So if someone comes to me and they're like, I'm really not confident, I really need to work on my confidence, but they're getting, 4 or 5 hours sleep a night, we'll park confidence and we'll work on sleep. So just an extra little tip there, I guess. Okay. Sorry.
Oh, I just said thank you.
Oh, sorry. You're very welcome. So next was Casey, and you were talking about how to be confident to enter a good setup without hesitation. So do you want to just tell us, how is that showing up for you in your trading, and just, elaborate a little bit more around that challenge?
Basically like a deer in headlights.
Okay. Yeah.
See everything, it looks great, and then I'm just a zombie. Done. Sometimes I'm like, oh, cool, nothing's set up. I'm happy because I felt that, okay, I did great because nothing showed up. So I felt better.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So is the action that's costing you money, say, is that you're seeing the setup appear, but you're not getting into it, like you're not pulling the trigger?
No, I just wait and wait, and then if I do get in, it's way too late, and then get stopped out and zero P&L or whatever. Just no success.
So this again is a super common issue, and it's funny because one person can have the problem of over trading. They're getting into everything that, isn't a setup. And then another person can have the problem of not getting into any trades. And the issue is that both of them are actually more focused on the P&L than the execution of their process. So it looks like they're completely polar opposite ends of the scale, but actually the issue is the same. But how that kind of manifests and the root causes of that could be different for each person. So in this case, when someone's really hesitating, again, we're asking, well, what significance are you placing on the P&L, like on money or on achievement or perfection, or, you're trying to, again, get curious about why is there such an emotional weight on the trade that it would actually stop you from taking it. So even to get more clarity on that, and just like as we're speaking here, do you feel it's to do with it often falls into two categories. So sometimes it's really the money, like a money mindset issue, say, and someone's really afraid of losing the money because they've had money trauma in the past, or they're, providing for their family, and it is a money issue. Sometimes it's more to do with their own self-worth and being right. So they're so afraid of being wrong that it stops them from taking action. Or again, that idea of just achievement in itself. So not necessarily money, it's more about achievement. So just as we're discussing this here, can you pinpoint what the fear is? Like if you were to get in and lose, what's
All
the
the
overriding
above,
thing? Say
all
that
the
again.
above, all the above.
All the above. Is there one
Achievement,
that's more,
achievement, P&L, and you stated something right or wrong, or
yeah, like being, so sometimes people really
Mhm.
they want to be right. So they're like, at all costs, I want to be right. I'm not prepared to be wrong. And
Yeah.
if that's the case, then they're gonna break the rules basically. But usually there's one that's kind of, all of those could be at play, but that there's one overriding one that really is at the crux of
I
it
mean,
all.
subconsciously, I think all of us could say that maybe, I'm speaking for everybody, but P&L, you don't want to lose money.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, even though it's going to happen and it's part of the process, I understand that. It's just it's just a matter of, yeah, that. But I think achievement is a lot to do with it as well. Like that kind of stands out a lot for me when you stated it.
So so you're exactly right. It's nobody wants to lose, P&L, but or profit. But it's when you dig deeper, you're asking yourself, what significance am I placing on the money? And sometimes if someone has a money mindset issue, it might be survival. It is about the money, but the money is just symbolic of something to them that triggers their emotions and a survival. So if somebody has very little money, has, invested everything in trading, and they're wondering how they're going to pay their rent next month, it's not, money is just a symbolic thing. The thing that is triggering them is, can I survive? Can I provide for myself? Can I provide for my family? So therefore it's like survival is the issue. And that's what they're battling with. For
And
somebody, sorry, go on.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna say you stated earlier that if someone like my background is remodeling and painting, I'm still doing it in the process, and I've told this with Megan and I've chatted about it, is that like I got to work as hard as I can, work my ass off all day long, and but here you got to be a little more strategic and manipulate, all these things, and so now I feel like I'm trying not hard enough.
So there definitely be
Because
subconscious
at first I
scripts
was
around
aggressive.
effort. Yeah,
Yeah.
because trading is its own, it has its own requirements, and maybe in some professions like effort invested equals ROI, but in trading that's not the case. So it could be that some part of you is feeling like, is judging yourself for not doing the work because you're not taking the trades, and then that's feeding into the loop. Another part of the picture, so even parking the subconscious piece, although I think that as an action point, really journaling around, like, what is it that I'm battling with when I'm afraid to take the trade? What is the biggest fear? If I take it and I lose it, is it survival? Is it self-worth? Is it that, I won't prove that this is a viable profession? Or will I lose face with my family? Like, what is the fear that's at the bottom of it? So that's one thing to explore. But then just separate to that is that pressure also comes into the mix. So when what you're talking about there is the freeze response. So when we talk about like fight, flight, or freeze, it's an actual coping mechanism to deal with stress. So uh, sometimes people dissociate and they completely numb out, and that allows them to like overtrade to the point where they're blowing past their daily loss limit. And for someone else, they're freezing like a deer in headlights and they're not taking any action. But what's happening is that your level of pressure and stress has escalated to the point where your subconscious or unconscious coping mechanisms are clicking in. And often, whatever is clicking in. So for somebody who numbs out, they probably do that in every stressful, like highly stressful situation in their life. For somebody who's freezing and kind of stops taking action, that's probably something that you might see in other areas of your life outside of trading as well. These tend to be like global ways that a person deals with pressure in any area of their lives. So if it's the freeze response that's happening, what you want to do is try and reduce the level of stress and pressure that you feel under. So you can either do that kind of you try and reduce the amount of physiological stress that you're feeling. So deep breathing, bring the level of stress response in your body down. That can be enough to sometimes like allow you to just trade as you want to trade. Or you can try and take down the level of mental stress. So sometimes that can mean reframing the significance that you place on the P&L. It can be around boosting your confidence so that you kind of feel more equipped to deal with the pressure. But it's basically what's happening is there's a subconscious element at play, and then there's the how you deal with pressure and stress. And both of those factors are combining to create this freeze response. So you have to actually address both of those pieces of the puzzle in order to be able to overcome the issue.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I'm conscious I'm throwing a lot, like there's, I'm giving
No,
a high level and there's a lot behind it, but hopefully it's enough of a steer to give you a practical
no, thank
step to
you.
take.
I would also just want to jump in and say that I find that this is very common with people who come from like the more like blue collar work. That you're constantly moving, it's very physical, you're like really just like go go go, and like Casey, I know that's what your job is to just like you go go go, you're up on a ladder, you're up on a roof, you're like every time I talk to you you're like on a ladder. And so like to be in a career path where you don't do something, like you take, like there's an inaction, which is actually sometimes action in trading is the inaction. It's also possible some of these trades that you're not getting into, you're beating yourself up because you feel like you need to be doing something. I've seen you take great trades when the setup is there and you've got the right signals and everything. So I would also dig into like, is it just that I feel like I need to be doing something? Because this career is so much different than a blue collar job where you're constantly moving all the time. And that might be just like another like extra like cherry on top to dig into on top of what Créde is already saying.
I'm
Okay, I got
just
some homework. Thank you.
hopefully everyone will by the time we finish. I'm just seeing Cindy there saying in the chat fight or flight. So sorry, just I kind of skimmed over that, but just to explain what I'm saying there is the natural human stress response. So the example that everyone always gives with this is if you were to suddenly meet a bear in the forest or wherever bears live, and you would either, your instinct would be to run away, and your whole physiology and everything would actually wire itself around getting you away as fast as possible, or somebody else might completely freeze. So it's people have different responses to significant stressors. And our body, like there's physiological changes that happen in our body and mentally and emotionally as well when we're faced with stress. And they're actually, those changes are an artifact of when we were like cavemen and women, and running away or being pumped full of adrenaline was helpful because the stressors that we were faced with were things like bears or, whatever, being eaten. But now that doesn't serve us. So now you're in traffic and your stress levels are rising and your blood pressure is rising and your heart rate is increasing. But it's not, you don't need that physiological response to happen to get away from the stressor, but it's just how our bodies react. So there's different, people kind of have a tendency to, it's fight. So stay and fight, like they come and kind of take on the challenge head on. They freeze, so they go into complete paralysis, like deer in headlights. There's the stressor, and you just kind of shut down. Fight, flight. Oh, and then flight, you're kind of running from it. How that translates in trading is usually there's the freezing, as you were talking about, like there you see the setup and you do nothing. The other one is this numbing out dissociation, where people their stress rises and then they block off their emotions and they kind of go on autopilot and they go on tilt. And then well, there's another response, but it's not actually relevant in the trading context, so I'm not going to go into it. But that's what we're talking about. It's just kind of your human reaction to stress, and then understanding which one you have a tendency towards, and then looking at how that's playing out in your trading. But the solution to all of that is work on reducing the level of pressure you feel under in the market.
Cindy, I love that you are asking this question, by the way, because I know that in one of our calls, you mentioned that you are struggling with moving your stop loss and getting rid of your stop loss. And
Yes.
that is a very common, I think in creative, maybe you could jump into this for a second. I know we're like basically at time. So actually first I want to be respectful of creative's time. Are you okay to go a
I'm
little
okay. Yeah,
bit
it's okay.
longer
Yeah,
or
yeah.
okay. Okay. Thank you. That oftentimes can lead to a freeze response. I've felt it myself where I have removed a stop loss and I've just kind of sat there like a deer in headlights staring, watching it go completely against me and being frozen, like not being able to get out of the position, even though all I have to do is move my hand over to my mouse and click exit, right? And that is just can be a very common response to like being on the wrong side of the trade, right? You don't take action and you don't fight and you don't get out of it. You just kind of like, oh shit, you know? So, yeah, I don't know, just bring that up.
That's really helpful to clarify that. So yes, please do keep dropping in the chat if I'm breezing past something. Are you okay, Megan, to go through a few more, or do
Yeah,
you?
yeah, we can go through a few more, probably another like I can do like another 15 minutes or so if you'd like.
Okay. I think I should be if my daughter starts crying for food, I'm
Okay,
feeding at the
no
moment. So
problem. No
she's
problem.
going to dictate this for me, but at the moment I don't hear any crying, so we're good. She's not
Okay.
on her own, just to in case anyone comes after me. She's with her dad. Okay, so um, the next one, oh, this was a really interesting one. So this was Cody.
Oh,
Um,
I'm so here for this question. I love this
yeah,
one.
this might take a while, so this because it's a deep one. I'm just, you know what, Cody, you explain it because I'm not going to read it out there. So you frame the question and we'll jump into it.
Yeah, and thank you for this. I think you've actually answered quite a bit with other people's questions because it's all in one. Um, so the overall thought process is the ego, more specifically, the emotional brain. So coming into trading, the primary conflict was always emotions serve no purpose, keep emotions out, which is a bit lazy because I didn't necessarily talk to like a performance coach or a mental coach or somebody who actually did it, right? Once you then transition into speaking with those that actually deal in high performance, you find out that emotions are very important. It serves 95% of the brain and all of that. The problem statement is like for me personally, the ego has always served as a superpower because when confronted with adversity, the ego overrides fear or anything for me specifically, and kind of comes at it from not a problem, we'll figure it out mentality. And that's kind of progressed over time to build up. Where that comes into conflict in trading specifically for me is when my ego is satisfied, we do great things. When my ego is dissatisfied in the timing or the sizing or the amount or whatever it may be, that's when the emotional override tends to show up. So to give you a specific example, recently there's a disconnect between technical prowess and actual execution, exacerbated by sizing increases, right? And so what's happening is the ego is sitting in the background watching and saying, we should be able to put on this size. And Megan and I have talked about this for a while. The frontal or like the thinking brain is like, no, we got a plan, let's stick with the plan. And then all of a sudden the ego's like, nope, override, boom, we're in on a trade. And all of a sudden you're thrown off, right? And so my question or the intent is I want the ego on the right side. I don't want it offside and I want to leverage that 95% of the brain to do great things. But I got to make sure it's pointed in the right direction. And so like, how do you focus that in the right way, understanding that the ego wins if you don't really have it pointed correctly.
So this was such an interesting question, and in order to be able to answer it properly, I need to understand a little bit more about how you are like the what you mean by ego. So without removing it from psychology and what this person says ego is or whatever, just when you're saying
Yeah.
ego, just give me a little bit more clarity around what you mean by ego, because sometimes people's interpretation of a word can be slightly different. So I just want to really understand with crystal clarity when you're saying ego, is it like confidence, or is it just kind of, if you can explain that in a little bit more depth?
Yeah. So ego for me would be uh, just confidence, like group feel, right? So like where I fit in the group, where I excel. It's the moderator from my internal wants and desires. And it can serve as a protector or it can serve as a motivator. So for instance, like when I say ego, um, if all of a sudden corporate decides to fire the entire group, instead of wallowing in self-pity, the ego then kicks in saying like, get your butt up, we're going to go get another job, right? So, or um, in trading, the ego serves to push me to try and get beyond the comfort zone. So it's kind of this, it's kind of inside me, the override for the fear, the emotional, the things like that. And it shows itself in forms of like confidence um and kind of a real belief that I can do whatever I can because I have the data to show that I've done it, right? So that's ego for me. Um
So,
but
sorry, go on.
yeah, but where the ego then causes problems is the overconfidence because the dissociation in like actual skill versus not. And I think it kind of falls in line with Casey and what I've kind of heard from Steve and Laura and all this sort of stuff. So coming from a background of sales, corporate performance, things like that, you're confronted with a hill to climb. You put aggressive effort in that hill. And for me, the ego is always at my back pushing and saying like, just keep going, embrace the suck, just keep going. In trading, the conflict shows up when the ego's like, what are we doing still here? Like we're still putting on, $100 of risk. What are we doing? Like, what you're doing, put on 200. But then the problem is when we put on 200, just as an example, the thinking brain's like, oh, hold on. Like this is, so then I'm not waiting for my stops. I'm doing just funky stuff, right? And then on the back end, when we lose, the ego's like, I don't know what to tell you, and you're just mad. So that's what the ego serves for me.
So that's really helpful clarification, and it does help me give an answer to it, or at least a steer in the right direction, hopefully. So when you're saying ego, I hear resilience, like an inner resilience and an inner like core belief. It's actually like as you're describing it to me, you're actually touching on lots of different things. If we were breaking it down from a psychology perspective, you're talking about like quite a few different things that you're lumping under the umbrella of ego. And that's important, not from a like, what's right or wrong in psychology, but just from the perspective of being able to tease everything out to answer the question. So I would say, and this is me going on my gut instinct, sometimes, you can just pinpoint where the area to work on is. And I would say, just based on what you've described, that you're probably quite, yeah, and you can please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but you're probably someone who's quite, operates in the left brain and is comfortable in the logic and the cerebral aspect of things, but possibly less so with emotions. That is I am making some assumptions here, but I'm
Yeah,
trusting my
no,
gut and
very,
my.
very, very specific. Yeah,
Okay.
emotions. I mean, I've even commented on the chat, like trading has been the only reason to engage emotion. I mean,
Okay, I
family
didn't see
and
that.
things like
I
that.
promise.
Yeah.
I
But
didn't.
I did say in the chat, Lisa and I were talking earlier, and yeah, trading is like, oh, I guess we got to work on the emotional side of it because whatever's currently going, the lack of is just not getting me where I want to go.
Yes. So I would say that rather than, you're asking, how do I use my ego? Like, how do I leverage my ego to address this? And I'm saying that's actually probably the wrong question to be asking. I don't mean wrong in terms of, oh, you're doing it wrong, but just redirecting the focus. Uh, it's actually your subconscious and your emotions. That's where the answer to this is. So when you're, oh, sorry, that's a very loud being there. So when you're saying you're jumping to kind of say wanting to increase your size and there's that impatience, there's some aspect of you that's making a judgment about yourself based on that. So you could frame it as saying, oh, it's confidence and all that, but actually it's not serving you. Confidence is great. It's a positive thing. But when it's tipping into pushing you to take actions that don't reflect the execution of your plan, or, you're sticking to your process, then you're moving into what you would typically call the ego. And you're like something that doesn't serve you. So for me, if I was saying, okay, if somebody was in that position and they were pushing themselves, saying like, why aren't we further ahead? Why aren't we trading with bigger size? One of the judgments that you might be making about yourself is, if I was a better trader, I would be making more money by now. Or I have the skill set to do better, or to make more money. So I'm going to skip some steps because I just want to get there quicker. So it's like, what is I might ask you this, if you're comfortable, like trying to think of it on the spot, great. If you're not, that's fine. You can either answer or just save it for later for reflection. What are the judgments that you're making about yourself at a kind of deeper level, like at a core level, when these things are happening? So you mentioned increasing size where it's not in your plan to do so. So if you could pinpoint a judgment that you're making about yourself when you're getting frustrated that you're not trading with bigger size, what might that be? And you can feel, if you don't answer, just say, I'll think about it later. But that's a useful question to ask.
Yeah, I think the judgment, I think judgment number one, and I already know this, incredibly self-critical, right? So judgment number one, I think, flares up as like, you spent a lot of time on this and we got to start seeing results. So that's number one, right? And that's fine. I could deal with that. Judgment number two, on the sizing thing, is I fundamentally believe that, and my data shows me on the left side of my brain, that if I just like, it's a number. So the consistency, or the hit rate doesn't change, the number changes in the sizing, which means the number on the screen changes. The problem is on the emotional side, because that is also a deficiency, which you called out. The frustration tags in because it's like, well, we spent how many years we've been alive. Now all of a sudden I want this thing so bad in trading. Now I got to work on this emotional thing, which was repressed for a reason, and it's lagging, right? So it's a muscle that hasn't been used. And so that's the frustration cycle, to where all of a sudden it's like the left side of the brain's like, we're here. And then the right side of the brain is really here. And I got to find, and it does. And what's funny, you say that because it shows up in sim trading versus live trading. My performance differential between sim trading and live trading, when the emotional override doesn't occur, is astronomical.
That's common for people.
I'm just trying to close that gap. And that's what I think the cycle is.
So this is the answer you're not going to want to hear. And it's not like, this is such a big topic.
I want to hear every answer, because I want this thing so bad.
So the high level answer, and this is a journey. I can say this flippantly, and the actual execution of this could take months, years. Not saying that you wouldn't make progress until that time period is up, but the answer for you is in reconnecting with your emotional self. The analogy I'm going to use is like, you're telling yourself that, I should, by logic, X, Y, Z, I should be following it like a robot. I should be further ahead. But that's true of every single trader. If it was that simple, every single trader would be a millionaire, because the issue is not the technical, once you have, the technical learning curve, but then you've got your plan, it's back tested, I execute it like a robot, I'm profitable. It doesn't work that way, because we're human. It's the reason why there's a massive multi-billion industry around weight loss. Everybody knows what to eat. Like, if you put any effort into understanding around nutrition and, what makes you gain weight, what makes you lose weight, what makes you gain muscle, like, everyone knows what to do. but nobody can do it. And that's because we're human and there's all of this other stuff going on under the surface. People are like stress eating, like all of the different things around weight loss, but it's a very simple thing. Like if it was that simple, everybody would have perfect bodies. There'd be no industry in weight loss, liposuction, like whatever. It's the same in trading. Yes, theoretically, if you're a robot, you have your strategy, it makes money, you just increase the size and it's all maths. But you're human, so that doesn't apply. And so you're trying to use the 5%, say, we're saying your conscious mind rules 5% of your actions and all of that. So you're saying that if 5% of your overall what drives your actions is optimized, that therefore that should result in X amount of profitability. But you're actually disregarding the 95% that is actually impacting everything. And that's kind of your answer. You're like, well, why aren't I further ahead? Because there's this 95% to actually start getting familiar with and understanding how it's impacting things and, working with it. So I would say that the answer to your question is not how do I leverage my ego to get past this issue, that's worked for me in the past. It has worked, like the confidence is great, all of that, but there's just this whole segment of yourself that you've disconnected from. Again, I'm making a few assumptions here, so feel free to take or leave what resonates. It's not even to say that there's anything necessarily big and scary in there. It's just that it's like you've just cut off from what can also be a superpower. If you're very comfortable with your emotions and you can use that as information to help drive your trading, you can, it doesn't have to be a negative thing that you're trying to like whip into shape. It's just an aspect of yourself as a human that can, yes, disrupt things, but that also is part of being human and can be super helpful as well. Like it can be an asset as well. But if you're disconnected from it, one, it can be negatively impacting your trading, and two, you're losing out on the benefits of being connected with it. So, and often when that happens, that's something that's not just related to trading. It's a broader life thing. So if you work on this for the purposes of improving your trading, you often find that other areas of your life improve as well, because you're reconnecting with that like major aspect of yourself that maybe is getting a little bit sidelined.
Cool. Would you recommend coming at it from a performance coach perspective or like a clinical perspective?
Well, so without knowing anything about you, like I would be talking about that from the performance coaching perspective. It could be that there's clinical stuff in there or trauma or whatever. So, I have no knowledge of that or information around that. Often what people do, and this is true when I was working in elite sport, and it's also true in trading, often people will start seeing that there's a motivation to work on that. Like someone who is really disconnected from their emotions, sort of, that's not for me. I don't like that stuff. When they see that it can improve their performance and they really care about the performance. So I saw this with a lot of, and I'm not stereotyping, it's just the experience that I had, a lot of male athletes who then understood through performance coaching that if I deal with my feelings around this thing that happened, or if I resolve the tension with my girlfriend, then I'll perform better on the pitch. They suddenly had a motivation that was very genuine for them to work on it. And then they started working on it from a performance coaching perspective. And sometimes that's enough. Or sometimes that actually opens the door to be like, oh, there's this bigger thing that I didn't look at. And then you can work with a performance coach from the perspective of like, say, trading performance, but you might find that there's something that could benefit from working with a therapist with as well. And that's really common. Like often people come to me for performance coaching. Through the discussions, we realize that actually there's this thing that would be really helpful to address. I'm not a therapist or a clinical psychologist, so I'll say, this is the type of person you would go to address that. And they might go and simultaneously or like concurrently be working with me for the performance piece and working with a therapist on the deeper trauma or life, the thing that affects the whole life of the person, and they can be really complementary. So it's not to say, like I would say, if there's nothing like glaringly obvious that you're saying, I've repressed this and I need to work on it with a therapist. If you're kind of curious, then I would say start with performance coaching and see what comes up, and then assess whether it's something that you want to take to a much deeper level, or is like just kind of making that reconnection with your emotions at a performance level enough to get you where you want to go.
Cool. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. how are we doing, Megan, there for time? And
Yeah, I think we should probably wrap up for today.
yeah.
We've kept you for a very long time, and we very much appreciate it. All of these questions were amazing. All of the answers and responses were also obviously very amazing. I hope that this helped all of you guys. Any last kind of words for Créde that anybody wants to say before we wrap up today?
Thank you.
You're very welcome. I love this. Like it's, and thanks to everyone for being so open and willing to talk back and forth. It makes it a much more interesting discussion and it helps me to help you better as well. So, it's not an easy thing to do. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's definitely not an easy thing to do. Créde has seen me cry many times. So, yeah, she has seen me at my most vulnerable, that is for sure. There were some questions we obviously didn't get to today. We will roll those into another session if Créde wants to do another session with us. And it's just, shows the importance of making sure you get your questions in early because it can take time to get through questions. So the first come, first serve basis here. Okay. Thank you very, very much, Créde. This was amazing. I really appreciate having you here. For everybody that, if you liked this and you do want to dig in deeper, just as a reminder, she has a course and it's amazing. So if you want to check it out and you want to dig into that before we see her again, that would be, I think, very useful for you guys. And I mentioned previously in the Discord as well that for the month of June, if you get the course, you get a one-on-one for a 30-minute one-on-one to help you plan kind of some areas of focus within the course. So it's a great thing to do. It's a great deal. So definitely check it out if you guys are interested. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. I loved it. I didn't even ask any questions, but I feel like I even learned a bunch of stuff. So I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Créde.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Créde.
I loved it too.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.